Today we're dealing with risk management. We have three speakers. Two of our speakers are already here. The third one's going to be rolling in a little bit late. He had an obligation he had to do in Durham with his family, but hopefully he'll be here. He's going to be the last speaker. But starting today with this first session, if you notice it's not in order of the app, is Brandon Harridan. He is a senior GIS analysis with Wake County, North Carolina, and he's focused with applications development and enterprise integration. He's got over 10 plus years of experience with state and local government. And Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Morning. So I want to talk today about something we developed for the Wake County Sheriff's Office. It's crime analytics. We're still in the first stage of it, so there's not super advanced analysis in there, but it's something that they didn't have before, which is kind of the first step, and then we're going to build on it. So in talking to the staff of the Sheriff's Office, they have crime analyst officers who interact with their records management system as a text-based thing. And so they're constantly querying it for anything that other people have asked for. So it's all kind of an on-demand thing. They don't necessarily have regular things they do. It's more just somebody asks a question and they go in the system and try to find it. And so they were wanting to do that same thing, but with a spatial bent to it. And so some of these conversations started happening before I started work. I'm with Wake County for a year and a half now. And so some of that conversations are before my time and I wasn't involved. And so kind of came in on the tail end when we started the actual solution. So what they really want to do is simple queries that happen to show location. So just like they do now in their current system, they want to be able to search for crime type, crimes within a date or date range, things like that, just kind of the basic things. And then also happen to show those things on a map. So just dots on a map, very simple. Just very average viewer. It doesn't matter that it's crime data. It could be any data. It's just a data viewer. They also wanted to be able to do the same thing, but with spatial queries. So search within a certain area, search within a certain district, things that are related to each other, that kind of thing. So generally speaking, that's kind of what they wanted. And also maybe limit those by the type, by the date, whatever works for them. Further thing is they want it easy. These aren't people who are in GIS day in, day out. They've never seen ArcMap. They don't use it. And so whatever this is ultimately has to work well for them and work for something that they may not open it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and come back to it and just obvious what they have to do and very simple to go through. So that was very important to them when talking to them. They also wanted it easy because they wanted something they could share with other people who are never going to use the application other than to look at it. And so those people who are not going to understand anything about how to interact with it, they want it just to be totally obvious about how it works. They want it to just send them a link. They open the link. There it is. It works magically. They see what they want to do and they move on. And most importantly, they want it to be as easy as possible. They don't want it to be anything that they have to think about or have to install or retrain on. They just want it to be one more tool they use and not have to think about it. So in talking to them and trying to figure out what they wanted to do, the first stop was, okay, what are we actually going to do for them and how are we going to help them? So option one would be ArcMap. So that's something we have internally. We have, well understood about how we use it. We can install it anywhere we need it to. But for a casual user, that's not really always the best option because they have to be trained on it. If they're not going to use it all the time, they're going to forget. Plus, when you have updates, they have to be retrained, and it's just kind of a never-ending cycle. The other option during that would be that we actually do some analysis for them, but we're too busy, they're too busy. That's really not a good solution either. So RGS Desktop was kind of an option, but we pushed that aside. Second option we looked at was RTS Online, and this was, again, about 2 years ago when we looked at this for them. And we set up a demo, we pulled their data in, looked at it, showed them how they can do some analysis with it. Here's how you import it. Here's how you save a web map. Here, you got to remember where it is. You got to go back to it. And again, it was something that even though at the time it was pretty obvious to somebody who works in GIS all the time how to work with it, it wasn't intuitive to them right off the bat. And it's not something they'd be using all the time. And they would, again, forget what to do and they'd have to call us. And it would be a never ending cycle of having to go back and forth with them. ArcGIS Online has improved the user interface. It was GIS designed by GIS people, so there's always that wall you run into where they're not, it doesn't work for people who've never seen GIS before. It's not as easy. They've gotten better with it. But again, that's something we ran into with them. So third option, and this is kind of when I started with the county, is we'd gotten to that point and said, all right, we actually need a custom application for them. Web app would be preferable because that's something they can easily get to. Then again, no installs, nothing to maintain, just pretty simple. And we had quite a few custom applications in our arsenal that we have already installed and used for other people. And so it's a well understood thing by us and easy to maintain. So the first thing we wanted to look at was their data. If anytime you're dealing with especially non-spatial data is, and you're trying to make a web application out of it or even a desktop application, data is usually the hard part because it was data that was not set up to be spatial in the first place. And you're trying to make it spatial while also leaving it the way it was. You're trying to live in both worlds. And sometimes that's hard if you're not doing that on the front end. So their data is official crime reports. So these are things where a deputy has gone in to their system, typed up a report, put in the people involved, the location, the address, the things that happened, and maybe down the road, what happened with it. Was it closed? Was it still open? Things like that. Just kind of the basic information. This is not call data. So this is not every call to 911. That is a different data set. That's hundreds of thousands of records. That's a different problem we're going to deal with later. This is not this. So this is very straightforward. This is what happened at this location, period. And this is only for the Wake County Sheriff. Nowadays, most law enforcement agencies talk to each other. Systems actually talk to each other, whether it's actual data sharing, like here's an export for you guys to import to use, or if it's just a live link to their data. Most of them are connected, and Sheriff is connected to the other municipalities in the county. But this is only for their data, so it's not glomming other things on within other jurisdictions. But you'll see that data does cross jurisdictions, that their crime doesn't really care about a random line somebody drew. So the data itself is it's in SQL Server. It's about 14,000 records. This goes back. This is a newer system for them, so it's about 4 years old now. So within that time, there's been about 14,000 records put into it. There are older records and older systems that they don't really care about that for this. They want to just look at the last few years to look at trends and things. Mostly it's about what's currently happening, a little bit about older, but that's not the focus of it. Now, they had XY coordinates in it, which is great. Don't have to worry about geocoding it. Don't have to worry about trying to make sure that the geocode is accurate. They already had data, so it's one more thing we don't have to do. But when an address is entered into their system, it's automatically geocoded, and then those coordinates are stored as numbers in their database. So it's not spatial data in their database. It's just numbers in their database that we can convert to coordinates. But it's a black box. It just kind of happens, and we can't see what's happening. We don't see any kind of, okay, can they choose, refine the address if it's not correct? It just kind of happens and just stores it. So as any organization that also maintains their own spatial data for geocoding with center lines, address points, you always assume your data is amazing and everybody else is terrible, and I don't know why anybody would ever use them. So we wanted to make sure that, okay, yeah, it's already geocoded, but is it accurate? Is it good? Is it useful geocoding? So we did a comparison between the two. We took the data that they have, which has those XYs. We created a data set from that, and then geocoded everything by address, took that, compared the two spatially, and it was about a 99% match within about 2 feet of each other. So it was really good geocode data that they use in the background. And so it was getting as accurate results from what we have with our own data we know is good. So again, one less thing we have to worry about. Now we just grab the data, import it, create it from the XY, done. It's really, there's no extra step of geocoding or anything like that. So we got lucky. So then we sat down with them and talked about what they actually wanted to do. So not just, pie in the sky, but more like, here's literally what do you want to be able to click on? How do you want to use it? What is important to you? What's important to the people who are asking you for these things so you could show them. So first is, again, back to the simple text search. So just like they do in their current system, they want to be able to search for crime types and things on a specific date or a date range, very simple, and just happen to show those on the map. Again, they also wanted proximity search. So they wanted to be able to either enter an address and then search 1, 2, 5 miles off of that, or they want to be able to click on the map, like in this area, show me 1, 2, 5 miles off of that. Third option is they have these patrol zones that are set up throughout the county. And so they may want to use that zone itself to query. So let me just see these particular crimes in that county, in this one district, and to pull those back. They also want to be able to show a heat map. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we show it, but that's something they thought, it may be a good tool to actually show people who are requesting things. Here's some general trends about what you're seeing about whatever they've actually queried for. They also want it to be a shareable link. So this is part of the reason we also went with a custom application, because this was much easier to do myself instead of trying to rely on ArcGIS Online to try to work something in. So they wanted to be able to, if a request comes in, they wanted to be able to do whatever they want to do, limit it down, tweak it, get exactly what we want, and then be able to just send that directly to somebody to let them interact with it. So the application does have print capability, so you can export as a PDF, and that's also fine, but that's a static shot in time. This is how it looked when I did that query. And for some things that's appropriate, but they also wanted to be able to say, all right, let me go back a month from now and do the exact same thing with any data that's updated in sense. And so the shareable link we use basically is just the query itself for whatever they queried for, and it redoes the query, pulls it right back, and they don't have to actually reselect anything or try to remember what they did or anything. It just works out of the box. That also means that anybody they send it to, it'll just automatically work, and then those people can interact with the map as well. They can click on things and ID, requery if they want to, whatever they want to do. They also wanted a data export option because this is disconnected from their current system. We pull the data, but the data doesn't know about each other on each side. So if they query things down and search for them and get the way they wanted, they didn't want to try to then figure that back out in their current system. They want just a list they could pull from and they can export in and go. And so it has an option to just download a CSV of whatever data they've actually selected. And again, it just kind of works for them. They don't have to do anything other than just open it. So here's the application itself. Try to keep it minimal, try to keep it easy. You can see the blue outlines. Those are actually their zones themselves, so that's how they've kind of broken up the county. There's along the top, there's base maps and a style, which I'll talk about in a second, search, and then toggle all data. Right now it doesn't show the data because there's no reason to load all the data at the county because it's just all crimes. But when they're zoomed in, they can toggle things on and off based on their selections. And then there's link, print, export, and then a help document. So the link is the shareable link that we talked about before. So for searching, again, they want it as easy as they can be, as easy as they could get it, but also showing the most possible options they could have. And that's kind of a hard thing to do when you're designing an application that they just want it to work with one button, but also do, tons of things. So you kind of have to balance what the user has to do. So when they search, they can select crimes, and that gives every single crime. They can do one or more crimes at a time if they want to. So from and to, so there can be a single date itself on the from or a date range, however far they want it. And then there's location search options as well. So those are, you can enter an address, or you can click on the map, and then you can change the buffer distance. Or the last option is selecting from a zone itself. So everything within that zone, those blue areas that you see there. So once they've kind of figured out their search and they've got things narrowed down and going back and forth, and this thing is there, they can interact with the map and back and forth till they get actually what they want. Then this is kind of the general result they get. And I apologize, we have a kind of a gray map in the background that probably washes out with the projector, but so you can see it's got a 1 mile buffer around. This is just generally downtown area. Clicked, and then give me all the crimes in it. They can mouse over anything they want and get some basic information. They can, from here, they can toggle all the data back on. So this only shows the selected data, but they can toggle the rest of the data on around it. Because again, that 1 mile buffer is just random. They may want to see one that's just outside it. So that would let them turn it on and be able to see it. And again, they can then export it, do whatever they want from here, and they're done. They can also make a heat map from it. The heat map is something that they really wanted to be able to show general trends to people who may just need to see something really quick and move on. But you do need to be careful with heat maps. Heat maps are something that people intuitively understand because you've grown up seeing weather maps all your life. So you understand patterns and how things flow, and it just makes sense when you see it. You don't really have to no one has to explain to you what it means. It's just kind of obvious what it means. But you can also, I don't want to say you can lie with it, but you can misrepresent what's happening with it. Heat map is good for something like temperature because you're taking 2 readings and then you can make the assumption that the area in between is roughly the same temperature. But for crime, just because a burglary happens 1 mile over here and 1 mile over here doesn't mean burglary is just as likely in between them. So you kind of have to make sure it's a tool, but it's not a decision-making tool. It's more of like okay, let's look at that closer and then dig down deeper. But it's not clearly there's a problem here. Let's do whatever, it's just part of your decision-making process. Because it's also important about what you've selected, your area you've selected, and also the methodology for how the heat map is generated. So this is right out of the box from what Esri can do. But there's some math involved in the background that you need to make sure you understand so you know what you're telling people when you show them the heat map. Because you can, again, give weird results like that. So this is a heat map of all the data in the county. So for those of you who are not from here, welcome to the crime-ridden hellscape that is Wake County. But that's not what it is. It just means it's roughly evenly distributed throughout the county. But it may look like, oh, we got a problem. So you got to make sure you use analysis correctly and understand the analysis that you're giving people so that they can understand what they're seeing. They can also, again, toggle all the data back on, and you can see there's kind of little dots everywhere, and they can still mouse over and also click one and get further details about it. We also, if we go back to this, in both cases, an individual location is a semi-opaque circle, so that if you get multiple locations on top of each other, it becomes darker just by default. And so it kind of shows you, oh, here's some things that are clearly in the same spot, and maybe there's a little more greater concentration than that. And so it kind of gives you the same idea as a heat map would be, but it's more about that location itself. Now, even then, you still got to be careful because some locations are, so you see there's a section here that looks really bad, but that's just because that's where the jail is. That's maybe the safest place you could stand at night. I don't know. But so you can still understand your data and what you're seeing before, you make decisions with it. So again, here, these are, in the result, it's kind of a light purple that then stacks. At least I think it's purple. I'm colorblind. It's roughly purple to me. This is a light gray, and then as they stack, they get darker. So that just, again, is a quick way to show them there are multiple things there, not only to see trend, but also when you click one, just know you might get additional stuff out of it. This is the shareable link they do. So they can click that and send that URL to anybody in the county, and it'll work. This is internal system, so it's not public. But anybody on County Network will be able to see exactly what they queried for, so it's an easy way to reproduce that. Again, they can export it. I'm sure you've all seen an Excel spreadsheet. I'll just put it up here so you can understand this exact same data that shows up in that identify on the right. All that data is exactly what they see here. So we're not hiding data from them or just showing them a subset. It's just everything they've given us, they get right back, and they can use the IDs to then go back into their system and figure out and get that exact same report. And putting in their system also gives them a lot more information than what they're giving us. This is just kind of the basics. They have much more detailed information that kind of cascades off of each crime report. So this works great for their data, except for one type of thing. There are certain crimes that they cannot, crime reports they cannot share with us. So there are things that involve children, sex crimes, and I think there's one other type that in order for us to access that data, we have to be fingerprinted and background checked and do all this kind of stuff and get approved for it. And that's not just me because I wrote the app. It's because we pull their data over into our database and serve it out through our ArcGIS server. Anybody who could potentially touch our ArcGIS server on the back end has to have the same thing. So that's like 9 or 10 people. And so it's just really not worth it for a handful of crime types, and it's not that many crimes themselves. And so it didn't seem worth it at the time to do that. So the option then in that case is more of a special project anyway. They're not going to do that all the time, luckily. So it's not a constant thing they'd have to worry about. So it would be, they'd pull an export out of their system. They could pull that into ArcGIS Online, geocode it on their own side, and see what they need to see, and then move on. And we can help them through that, but that would again just be more of a, hey, we need to do this. Can you help us do it? And then we would help them do it. We wouldn't be something they had to constantly do. So again, it'd be ArcGIS Online solution. Right now, we have installed ArcGIS Portal, the new version of ArcGIS Portal on our internal system, and we're testing it to figure out what it can do, what it can't do, how can we break it. And then so eventually that will roll out to our users internally. And so for people who do have sensitive data, like the sheriff's office with certain crimes, or human services has a lot of health related data that we have been helping them with on desktop, but they're reluctant to put it in ArcGIS Online because even though it's secure, nothing is really secure on the internet. So they just want to be careful and not do it. So, but Portal's a good way because that's within our system. It doesn't leave our firewall, and it works just like ArcGIS Online. You're literally just putting ArcGIS Online in your system, and so it's very easy to use. So we're testing that, and we'll eventually roll them into that. So future enhancements of what we're going to. Again, this right now it's basically just a data viewer. There's nothing overly special about it. It's just like every other map viewer you've ever seen produced by a GIS company or organization. But we want to start adding to it over time. And so the next big thing will be adding in call data. And so, as I said before, that's hundreds of thousands of records. That's a much bigger problem to go over. Haven't even seen the data, so I don't know if it also has XYs on it. If it does, great. I'm not counting on it because you get a lot of calls of, it's somewhere on I-40. That's not an address. It's not a good place, So there will be a lot of data that falls out of it, but it's still going to be useful data for them to use with these crime reports to kind of compare the two together and look for further trends than what they're seeing just from the crime reports. Because if you have one burglary, you might have 12 calls about seeing a weird van driving around the area, and that might help you then narrow some other things down. So they want to put the two things together and get further information out of it. I'd also like to try to get data from other jurisdictions in Wake County. So all the cities, we have a lot of cities in Wake County, but try to get their data as well so they can compare the two and see things that, even though we have data that crosses, again, what I showed you was from downtown, and the sheriff that's Raleigh, but sheriff does respond to things downtown, and Raleigh responds to things just outside. So it kind of depends on the emergency and what's happening. So adding in their data as well would give the sheriff's office further information, but also means we might be able to give the same thing back to those cities because they have their data. We can just roll it in and they wouldn't have to worry about it. We'd even give them the app because I don't care about the code. Just here's the code. You can figure out your data. So that's it for me. Again, that's what we're going through. And next, we'll probably also add on some more analysis things, but that's more further down the road. So again, I'm Brandon Harrington. I'm with Wake County. That's my contact info, but it's also in the app if you need to email me or call me. My phone number's in there for some reason. And then I think we're going to take questions at the end if you do have anything, so save time for everybody. But so if you have any other questions, we can do that at the end, or you can find me somewhere in here, and I'd be happy to help. Thanks.